Hi, I've had a lot of people get in touch with me recently asking about difficulties playing bar chords. Now, of course, they're difficult for everyone, and you should persevere and have a look at lots of other videos and on techniques to play bar chords and work at it. But several of the people that got in touch have either had injuries or have conditions that mean that their left hand just doesn't work like that. And it seems a shame that those people have been saying to me, every time I try and play a song that I want to play, it's got one chord in it that I can't do, a bar chord, because my hand just doesn't work like that. And even if I transpose it into another key, then another one of those chords will end up being a bar chord. Am I forever stuck just playing simple songs with 3 open chords? Well, there's always a way, and I would advise you to go and seek out the guitarist Django Reinhardt. There's plenty of videos of him. Django was a legendary jazz guitarist, and he was injured in a fire. His left hand, he ended up with his ring and little fingers kind of fused and bent, which meant that he did all of his mind-blowing soloing with just his first 2 fingers, which is incredible in itself. But he also devised a way of being able to use these 2 fingers together in a limited way to allow him to play chords. And that meant he came up with new ways of playing chords. And now guitarists learn to play chords that way because that's the sound of the legendary Django Reinhardt. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to use 2 shapes, no bars, and we're going to see just how many major, minor and 7th chords we can play. And you might be surprised. Okay, the 2 shapes we're going to use are G and G7. That's it. So just make sure that you can play a G chord and a G7 chord. And when you've done that, I want you to then try and play those same 2 shapes, but 1 string across. So jump them from here to here. I'm moving towards the ceiling. Every finger hops across a string, and the same with my G7. So now we have 2 shapes, but each one exists on either the highest 3 strings or the lowest 3 strings. So just get your fingers around that. G, G7. Now don't worry what they sound like yet. They'll both sound great actually. G, G7, then move the G across. Sounds great. And move the G7 across. Sounds great. Then you might even have played those chord shapes before. What you've actually got there is a B7 and an F sharp minor. Now that's interesting because that means we've already had a major chord, G, a 7th chord, G7, another 7th chord, B7, and a minor chord, F sharp minor. Just with those 2 shapes, we've covered major, minor, and 7th. So now let's look how we can move those around the neck and see how many chords that we can play, particularly how many of those gaps we can fill in between the chords that we already know as open chords down here. So a good place to start would be the G chord. So play your G chord, but what I want you to do is bring your left thumb around. Now we're not trying to wrap it round and fret the note, we're just bringing it around enough so that the little squidgy bit that sticks out on the middle of your thumb, the pad of your thumb, can just touch the side of the string. I'm actually pointing the tip of my thumb straight at the camera, like that. And as you can see, the pad of my thumb is just touching the side of the string, which means it won't ring. So then when I strum, and I can strum without worrying about hitting all 4 strings, that string isn't ringing. Now, it doesn't matter for a G chord, but when we move it around, it'll stop that open string clashing with the chord. Let's see what we've got. First of all, we can slide it towards the nut 1, so it's down at the 1st fret. And then we have an F sharp chord. F sharp. Then we slide it up back to our G. Slide it up 1 more to the 3rd fret, A flat. 1 more, A. Now, we already have an A down here, but now we've got 2. After the A at the 5th fret, we have B flat. At the 6th fret, we have B. Now we could go to the 7th fret and we'd have C, but of course we have a C down there, so we don't have to. Okay, what comes after C? C sharp. Okay, that's a tricky one, but we could take that 7th fret and move that one up to the 8th fret. C sharp. We're getting quite high up the neck now, but don't worry, after C sharp comes D. Now, you'll already have a shape for D that doesn't need a bar down here. Just 2, 2, 2, 0. So we already have a D. After D comes E flat. Well, we already have an open chord for E flat. Open, 3, 3, 1. After E flat comes E, and there is one down here you can play for E. It's a little bit of a stretch, but 1, 4, open, 2. That's our E. What comes after E? F. Well, we can just play a 2-finger F down there. What comes after F? F sharp. Oh, that's where we started with our G 1 fret down. So I've just played every single major chord using open chord shapes that we might already know and filling in the gaps using that G shape. Here we go. I'm going to go through all of them, through the entire musical alphabet. So we're going to start with our G shape, but down at the 1st fret, muting the 4th string, F sharp. F sharp, G, A flat, A, but I could play the A down there, B flat, B, C, but I could play it with a regular C chord, C sharp. After C sharp becomes D, we play our regular open D chord. After D, E flat, we've got our open E flat chord. After that comes E, that can be a bit tricky, but there's an open chord for that. After E comes F, and after F we're back where we started at the 1st fret with the G chord shape. Every single major chord with no bars. Right, let's just see what happens if we take that G chord shape and turn it into a G7 and do the same thing. It's quite tricky. We've got to mute that 4th string. If we slide it down to the 1st fret, our index finger will fall off, but it will still work. Mute, 1, open 1. F sharp 7, slide back up to where our G7 is. That's, of course, is G7. Up to the 2nd fret, A flat 7. Up to the 3rd fret, A7. And of course, we have an A7 there, but we've got 2 now. B flat 7 at the 4th fret. B7 at the 5th fret. Now, if you remember back to when we were first looking at the shapes, we said that the 2nd fret of our G chord on the wrong strings was also a B7. Remember that, we'll come back to that in a moment. So 5th fret, B7. 6th fret, C7. But of course we can play a C7 down there. C7. C sharp 7. D7. Well, instead of sliding up for the D7, why don't we just go down here and play 2, open, 2, open. D7. After D, we want an E flat 7, and there is one down here. It looks like this. 1, 1, and this one comes in at the 3rd fret. It's just like a G, but we lower those first 2 fingers and leave this one here at the 3rd fret. That's an E flat 7. After that comes E7. Well, we've got a 3-finger E7 down here. After E7, we want an F7. Well, we can do an F7 by playing a 2-finger F there and putting our ring finger down on the 3rd fret of the C string, F7. After F7 comes F sharp 7. Hang on, that's where we started with our G7 down a fret. So we've gone through every 7th chord. And we've still only used 2 of our shapes. Okay, minor chords. Take your G7 shape and move it across the strings towards the ceiling, so we end up with 2, 1, 2, open, and we're going to try and mute that open string, ideally using the side of our index finger, but it's quite tricky when we're near the nut for that. As we move up, that'll start to be a lot easier. But you've got to try and touch that 1st string, either with side of your index finger or by flattening out your ring finger a little bit so it just touches the string next to it. that. If you're really struggling, you can always bring your little finger in and just let it flop on the strings and get in the way and generally mute that string. That's an F sharp minor chord. If we move it up one, it becomes a G minor chord. We've already got a G minor down here. Now we've got another one. Then we get an A flat minor. Now I've moved up a little bit, I don't know if you can see, but the side of my index finger now is squashed up against the edge of the neck and is just touching that first string enough. Couldn't really do that when I was too close to the nut. My index finger will be on the wrong side of the nut. But now I've got up here, I've got up to the 3rd fret with my index finger, A flat minor. I can just do it. 4th fret, A minor. Well, you've got an A minor down there. You've got another one. B flat minor. B minor. Up at the 7th fret, C minor. One higher than that, C sharp minor. After C sharp, we could always do our D minor down here. E flat minor comes next. Now, if you take your standard E minor shape and slide it down, but then move your ring finger across to the 4th string and put your little finger where your ring finger was, so we get 3, 3, 2, 1. That's an E flat minor without a bar. After E flat minor comes E minor. We can play our straightforward E minor shape. After E minor comes F minor. We can play that with 3 fingers, our standard F minor open chord shape. 1 open, 1 3. And after F minor, F sharp minor. And we're back where we started with our G7 lookalike on the roll 3 strings. So we've just played every minor chord as well. The thing is, we've still got one shape left. The one that looks like a G chord, but moved across the strings. And we said that was a B7 there. Now, if you remember, when we were playing the G7 chord, the regular G7 chord shape, and moving that one up, when we got to the 5th fret with our index finger, that was a B7. Which means instead of playing that one there, I could just play my G1 moved across, and that would be a B7. Same chord. And then instead of having to slide right up here to get higher than B7, when I get to the 5th fret, I can move over to the other shape and start sliding that one up. C7, C sharp 7, D7, E flat 7, E7, and you know, we're doing chords that you already know the open chords for down there. In fact, you're starting to find chords in multiple places on the neck. Now, I know this is flying by very, very quickly, but you'll be pleased to know that this is all in a downloadable chart. If you just go to learntheukulele.co.uk, you'll find the link to it as well below this video in the description. So you can download that chart and you can go through this video again with all of the diagrams as I play them, showing you every single major, minor and 7th chord with no bars. Now, it's worth mentioning as well at this point that if you can play bar chords, these are still really useful. I use them all the time. So here's a couple of examples of why you might choose to use these chords even when you can play bar chords. Let's say I have a song that goes from an A flat 7 to an A7 very quickly. Now here's my A7. Now that's a bit tricky because I can't slide that one down any further. I've run out of neck. But I could play my A7 here. I could mute the 4th string. In fact, for an A7, I don't even have to mute it. I can just play a G7 chord 2 frets up. So my index finger's at the 3rd fret. That's an A7. But if I do mute the G string, I can just slide between the 2nd fret and the 3rd fret chords. And that's so much easier than switching between 2 different fingerings for those chords. Here's a classic ending in the key of C, where you take your G7 and you slide it up 1 fret to an A flat 7. you put your thumb round to mute that string and you play. Then you slide it down to a G7 and then you play a C. So you get this. Now that's much easier to do like that than fingering a full G-sharp 7 chord. It's much easier just to bring your thumb round and mute that string. And not only is it easier, it's much easier to get smooth and make it sound musical. Here's another way that you might want to use them. If you're playing rhythm, and this is common in lots of other instruments, for some reason we feel on the uke that we have to play all 4 strings all the time for some reason, but I also play the guitar and I also play the tenor banjo, and those instruments it's quite common to strum all of the strings but have only maybe 3 of the 4 tenor banjo strings, or maybe 4 or even 3 of the guitar strings playing a note and the others being muted. And it's particularly common in jazz, and it's all to do with getting a focused tone that cuts through. This is why you don't see many jazz guitarists playing big, open ringy chords on all 6 strings like you might see a folk guitar player playing. And that's because it just creates this big wash of sound that's great when you're a guitar player strumming away on your own, but if you're in a jazz band, you need something rhythmic and cutting like this. So jazz guitarists will pare down their chords to maybe 3 notes, but they won't try and pick out 3 notes. They'll mute the other strings and strum hard, and we'll only hear those 3 notes. Well, we can do that on the ukulele as well. So instead of playing a C7 like this with my one finger there, it's a bit ringy and a bit much if I'm playing with other people. Well, of course I could bar the 3rd fret and play a C7 there, but I can make that chord even smaller by using my G shape and playing it on the wrong 3 strings at the 3rd fret and muting my 1st string. It's doing the job of a C7 chord. I can control it because there are no open strings, so I can take off the pressure of those fingers easily as soon as I've strummed it. It's not big, it's not getting in anybody else's way, and it's perfect if you're accompanying someone else who's taking a solo or a singer, or you're just trying to fit in with other instruments and find your space. I'd be much better off playing that if I've got a piano player and a double bass player and things like that around me. People will hear me better because I've made my chord smaller and it's got its own little space in the frequency to cut through that's not mixing up with other musicians. I really hope this has helped. There is always a way of playing what you want to play. Sometimes you just have to be a little bit imaginative and think about how you can do it rather than how everyone else says you have to do it. The most important thing is, of course, that we're playing music. That's the bottom line. I hope this has helped, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.